Hello and welcome to my Real Estate Exam Prep podcast series. I've already helped hundreds of students start their real estate careers, and my goal is to help you pass your exams. You can check out all 11 of my podcasts in this National Exam Prep series. And for more information, watch my full lesson videos for each topic on my YouTube channel at Tom's Next Level Real Estate. Today our focus is on transfer of title. I'm going to start with key words and key concepts, and then we'll discuss in detail the types of test questions you can expect. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the title to property and the difference between title and deeds. Then we'll go through the different types of deeds that you're going to see on your exam, so you know the distinctions between those and what makes a valid deed. And then we'll finish up with a little bit of information about transferring title from one owner to another. Here's a distinction I want to make sure you're clear about before you take your exam. Title to a property is a concept, but a deed is an actual document. So remember, deed is a document, title to property is a concept. When buyers buy property, buyers always seek marketable title. That'll be a test question. What do buyers seek when they buy real property? They seek marketable title. That's title that's free from reasonable doubt. Not all doubt, but title free from reasonable doubt. Should not have any clouds or defects on it. Clouds or defects could be things like encroachments, encumbrances. All of those may impact the value of the property. Here's some vocabulary you're going to see on your exam. When two parties transfer title from one party to the other, and both parties want it to happen, that's a normal closing. That's called voluntary alienation. Now, remember, alienation in real estate is any transfer of title from one party to another. In some cases, it's voluntary. In most cases today, between buyers and sellers, it's voluntary alienation. But there are also examples of involuntary alienation. That's without the owner's consent, someone else getting title to their property. Those would be things like eminent domain or a foreclosure on a property. Those are examples of involuntary alienation. Deeds, when they're transferred from the seller to the buyer, convey the rights, title, and interest to the property. So that's the deed, the document, but it conveys rights, title, and interest to the property. Remember your E's and O's here. The seller is the grantor who gives the deed to the buyer at closing, and the buyer then is the grantee. One other testable item is it's the statute of frauds. Remember that statute of frauds, that says all deeds transferring real property from one party to another must be in writing. All deeds must be in writing. You will see several questions on your exam about valid deeds. So let's review what are the essential elements of a valid deed. Okay, first of all, the grantor on the deed, the seller, must be legally competent. Keyword associations here. The grantor must be legally competent. However, the grantee, the buyer who's receiving the deed, must only be identifiable. Must be identifiable. There has to be consideration, which in the case of deeds is promises. Consideration, remember this, on a deed is not earnest money, but consideration as an essential element of a valid deed is promises or warranties. There must be a granting clause. What's being granted from the grantor to the seller? What type of estate is being granted? That has to be in there. Has to be a legal description. The deed must be signed by all of the grantors. All of the sellers, all of the owners must sign the deed. Do the grantees sign the deed? No, they don't. Remember that for your exam. And there has to be acceptance of the deed by the grantee. The grantee must look at the deed and then finally accept it. Those are essential elements of a valid deed. Other types of deeds that you'll see on the exam are a void deed. What makes a deed void? If it isn't valid, then it's likely void. A void deed is a deed that is missing at least one of the essential elements. So valid is pretty easy to test, and void is also pretty easy to test because it's missing at least one of those essential elements. A third category of deeds you'll find on your exam is voidable. So deeds are either valid, void, or voidable. So what makes a deed voidable? Well, a voidable deed is one where one party may back out because the whole transaction contained some fraud or duress. Or the example you're likely to see on the exam is if a deed was signed by a minor. The minor could void the deed, the minor could back out of the transaction, and that deed is voidable. They could back out because they're a minor. So on your exam, you might see a question phrased like this. Is a deed signed by a minor valid, void, or voidable? The answer that you want to give is voidable. It is not automatically void because the minor could go through with the transaction if they decided they wanted to. However, they also could back out because they're a minor, and that makes the deed voidable. Please remember that for your exam. Let's discuss the different types of deeds you're likely to see on your exam. The most common type of deed in the marketplace today, from a seller to a buyer, is a general warranty deed. That's the deed that every buyer wants. A general warranty deed. It contains 5 covenants, 5 warranties. A warranty is a promise. A covenant is also a promise. They're synonymous. So the 5 covenants you'll find on a general warranty deed are the covenant of seisin, the covenant against encumbrances, covenant of quiet enjoyment, further assurance, and warranties forever. Those are the 5 covenants you'll find on a general warranty deed. Make sure you review those for your exam and have a grasp on what each one of those means. If you see a test question phrased something like, which type of deed is most common in the marketplace between a typical seller and a typical buyer, it's going to be a general warranty deed. It's most often used. So, other types of deeds they'll ask you about on the exam are special or limited warranty deed. That's a very common question. Where do you find those? Those are typically related to bank-owned properties. Because when a bank sells a property that they took back probably in foreclosure, they're going to limit the warranties they make to a new buyer. The warranties are limited to the time period that the bank owned the property. So that's a special or a limited warranty deed. You might find something on the exam about a bargain and a sale deed. There are no warranties with those. Typically come with foreclosures and tax sales. And quitclaim deed. You're bound to see a few questions about quitclaim deeds. First of all, a quitclaim deed gives the least protection to the buyer, to the grantee. They contain no warranties at all. And on the test, they'll most often ask you about quitclaim deeds in a test question related to a divorce. So if you see a question about the type of deeds that can be used or are most often used, and the word divorce is in the test question, very likely the answer is going to be a quitclaim deed. Here's a couple other types of deeds that may show up on your exam. A trustee's deed. That's a deed that is conveying ownership of the property when there's a foreclosure on a property in a deed of trust state. Just remember, as a quick review, in a deed of trust state, the trustee holds legal title to the property, and if the property is foreclosed upon, the trustee will transfer title to the high bidder at the sheriff's sale. Another type of deed is a deed pursuant to a court order. Pretty much just what it says. If a judge orders the transfer of title of a property, then that would be a deed that's created pursuant to a court order. Many times they happen because of a court order or a will. Let's review what happens at a closing when there's an actual transfer of title, transfer of ownership from one party to another. Number one, all grantors must sign the deed. That means everybody who's an owner that wants to transfer ownership to a buyer must sign the deed. And here's a type of thing you might see on the exam. Two siblings inherit a property from their last surviving parent when that parent passes away. So they've inherited a property. These two siblings own the property. However, those two siblings are also married. So in most states, if you're married, your spouse is also an owner of the property. So in a case where two married siblings inherit a property and want to sell it, how many grantors are there that have to sign the deed? The answer is going to be 4, the two siblings and the two spouses. So remember, that's the sequence you might want to remember for your exam. Okay. Now the deed is signed at the closing table by all of the grantors. The deed gets delivered to the buyer. Remember, the deed is signed by the sellers, the grantors, but the deed is not signed by the buyers. Now the closer will slide the deed across the table to all the buyers and say, do you accept this deed? If the buyers, if the grantees whose names are on the deed accept the deed, then title transfers at that moment in time. So you see the difference between title and a deed, things we talked about in the beginning. A deed is an actual document, but title of the property is a concept. Remember this, the buyers become the new owners once they accept the deed. Title transfers at the closing table. Once the closing is complete, the grantees have accepted the deed. It is their property. Now the deed needs to be recorded down at the county recorder's office. And remember, documents get recorded to provide constructive notice. That means constructive notice to the world that the property is now owned by a new person, a new party. Voluntary alienation has taken place in this case. So there is a new owner, record the deed to provide constructive notice to anybody who might want to go look in that legal description file to find out who the new owner is. And that really wraps up our Transfer of Title podcast. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you got some helpful information here. Don't forget, you can always go to my YouTube channel at Tom's Next Level Real Estate. I have full lesson videos out there for all 10 of the National Exam Prep topics. I also have podcasts like this for all 10 of the topics. So remember, as always, my goal is to help you pass your exams.